We are approaching the end of our series, The Kingdom Way of Life, and we've been in it for quite a while now, and we've really been wrestling with what does it look like to live as part of God's kingdom? What does it look like to do life with God, to live with God? And we've been focusing really on Jesus' most famous teaching, the Sermon on the Mount. And so we're coming towards the end of that sermon, but we want to continue just to wrestle with what does it look like to live with God? I remember when I was growing up, I was on various sports teams, and I was, baseball teams and a basketball team, and very, very briefly on a soccer team. And one of the things that I remember is that there are just some players who are better in practice than in games. You ever see that? And sometimes it was me, right? But there are just some players that, man, in the practice, they are clutch. Right, in practice, they can hit every shot and they can make every throw and they can hit every pitch. But for whatever reason, it just didn't seem to translate into the games. There's something about being clutch that it's just easier when there's nothing on the line. And I think one of the challenges of living with God, of doing life with God, is this idea of living. It entails our whole lives, not just those moments when there's just not a lot on the line. It's actually in those moments when everything is on the line that it gets real. And it's easy in some moments, like when we're in church, that we can feel so close to God. We sing some songs and we pray and we hear a message and we get, moved by that and we're excited. In those moments, we're like, God, I just feel so close to you. And I'm just, there's just the serenity with life and all the people around us and so beautiful. And then we walk out those doors and reality smacks us upside the head. And you walk outside those doors, and suddenly you are faced with all sorts of trying, difficult, and challenging situations and circumstances, not to mention all sorts of trying, difficult, challenging people. People, man, they're the worst, People, life would be so much easier without people, wouldn't it? I mean, people can be so aggravating, like your boss. Or maybe it's the roommate who never does the dishes or cleans up after themselves. Maybe it's your neighbor who takes the one shady parking space in front of your house, but it's actually your tree, right? See, it's just so much easier to love people in theory than in real life, isn't it? It's so much easier to love people when really nothing's on the line. We can love them in our imaginations rather than in real life. Do you ever just wish you had fewer people in your life? Maybe just one or two. Maybe you have a list. I hope I'm not on the list. But what we can do is see certain people in our lives and we begin to write them off in our minds. And maybe you can't get rid of them, right? Maybe they actually live in your family, right? Maybe they live in your home. Maybe you go to work with them every day. Maybe you have to see them for whatever reason. Maybe they live next door. But in your mind, you know them, you know what they're about, and you are done with them. Right, you have written them off, and it would be great if they would relocate. It would be wonderful if they would move away, get transferred to another office, but the reality is that there are always more difficult people around. We never seem to run out of them, as best I can tell. There's always more people to aggravate us, get on our nerves, annoy us. And I think this is one of the reasons that we love technology, because Siri imitates human interaction to some degree, but without all the annoyingness of being an actual human being. Right? We like Siri, we like Alexis, we like technology that increasingly the whole goal is to make it more like you're interacting with a human person. That is the goal with so much of what's being developed. And it's wonderful because we can feel like we're having human interaction without actually dealing with human beings. And really, this has been our technological dream for a really long time. If you read science fiction, you watch science fiction, right? I mean, think back to like 2001 Space Odyssey and Stepford Wives and iRobot, and even those stories, just to be clear, where AI goes rogue and goes bad, there's a reason we're attracted to it. There's a reason that we're still trying to develop that technology because we want all of the benefits of having somebody who will talk to us, who will listen to us, who will do everything that we ask, and they never talk back. They never ask for anything. They only give what we want. And so maybe the reason that we are so quick to write people off is because we expect people to act more like an app or a program. See, I don't have to feel bad if my app doesn't work if I just delete the app. right? It doesn't function. No remorse, no pity, nothing personality, no personality quirks I got to worry about, nothing to navigate. I just delete it. I'm done with it. And maybe we've gotten to this point where we're so accustomed to things that serve us in that way that we expect that from other people as well. And when a particular human doesn't live up to our expectations and live up to our standards, then why wouldn't I just sort of write them off as well? Or maybe this is how we've been for a long time as human beings. Maybe people have always been tempted to treat other people like they are means to our ends rather than ends unto themselves. Maybe AI is just our most advanced and sophisticated way of trying to make people disposable, but in our heart of hearts, what we really want is people who will do everything that we want. And if they don't, then why not? I mean, it's so aggravating, isn't it? I mean, people don't do what you want them to do, and it would be so much easier if they were just more like us. Because let's face it, they're the ones who are the problem. It's not us. They're the difficult people. I mean, have you seen what they're doing? It's not us. We just need them to be more like us, and everything would be okay. But evidently, Jesus sees it a little differently. Evidently, Jesus, he doesn't think that people are disposable. And Jesus doesn't think that people, even as difficult as they can be, as annoying as they can be, as obnoxious as they can be, how crazy their ideas are, he seems to think that there's something valuable about them. And he seems to think that the only way to deal with difficult people is actually to treat them better than they deserve. In Matthew 7, in verse 1, he starts this way. He says, "Do not judge, or you too will be judged. For in the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." Now listen, I know that we're in a church right now, and this is Jesus talking, and so we all sort of nod politely along. We're like, oh yeah, that's so true. But can I tell you, I know that if we were in a different context, and this was a different kind of conversation, and maybe I wasn't the pastor, but you're having this conversation, and someone said to you, you shouldn't be so judgy, you would say, really? Have you seen that debate the other night? Did you see that guy? That guy's a jerk. Yeah, have you met my boss? Man, don't get on me about how I should feel about my boss. Have you met my mother-in-law? She's the worst. See, let's be honest here, shall we? Like, we can sit in here and we can feel really sanctimonious and superior and like we're so great. We would never think to judge this way. A little honesty, okay? We're judgy people. It comes so easily. It can become such a habit. It can become part of life. It becomes how we see the world. Now, I know I'm older than some of you. I remember a time where it just seemed like things were a little more peaceful. Maybe it's just, nostalgia, I don't know. But I remember this beautiful time called the 90s. That's when I was growing up. And what I remember was that there was this mantra, live and let live. And maybe that came from a previous year. I have no idea. It was new to me in the 90s. And I had a buddy who his whole thing, his favorite expression was, whatever floats your boat. And it was just, hey, you do you, right? And it's just, let's live and let live, and you do whatever makes you happy so long as it doesn't hurt anyone else. And I think we're still trying to spin that in some ways, but let's be honest, this sounds really naive now, doesn't it? It sounds really kind of silly. Because if the last few years have taught us nothing, it's that the division and the divide that we feel is actually deeper than we imagined. That the way that you want to live collides head on with the way that I want to live. And the way I want to live often collides head on with the way that you want to live. And something has to give. Right? There's something that is mutually exclusive about the way that we see and the way that we approach life. And then on top of that, we live in a world that is spinning so fast. I mean, things move so quickly. This is part of living in the digital age, so that we really don't even have time to properly evaluate anything. I mean, we live in a digital age where we are inundated all the time with just this nonstop flow of information, all of which, if you're paying attention, is fishing for a response from you. So every ad, every political advertisement, every hot take, every article, every op-ed, every picture someone posts, all of it is fishing for you to respond. Do you like this? Do you not like this? Quick, decide. Are you offended or are you not offended? Decide right now. Do you agree? Do you not agree? And so we are being conditioned and have been conditioned to judge other people. Their opinions, their lives, their character, through these almost instantaneous visions of who they are, this moment, millisecond interactions, never more than 280 characters. Right? What could possibly go wrong? It's almost as though this online digital age in which we inhabit is detrimental to the human race. Right? It doesn't seem to be bringing out the best of our humanity. Right? See, I remember years ago, some of you remember this, when everything started to really move online. So we used to have these things called newspapers. It was crazy. You could just open up the newspaper and actually read sports and things. It was amazing. Some of you have never seen that before. But when they started moving everything online, someone had this great idea. They said, you know what? We're going to put comment sections after every article and every blog and everything that's posted. And they've pretty much done away with this. They're either hidden or they're just gone. And the reason is because when they first envisioned it, they said, this will be great. People can post their opinions, and then other people can constructively interact with them and share their ideas, and there'll be this healthy debate, and communities will be built, and understanding will be, become reality, and we'll all live happily ever after. But of course, that's not what happened. Instead, people would post an ugly comment that would get an ugly comment in return, and then it would just turn into Lord of the Flies, and other people are weighing in, and there's nothing constructive, nothing healthy, nothing good. See, I think with a lot of you, what we're looking for is just a little more sanity in the world. But here's the kicker. Sanity requires humility. It requires considering even the possibility that someone else could judge you just as easily as you judge them. That someone else could look at you and write you off just as easily as you could write them off. And Jesus says, for in the same way you judge others, you will be judged. See, how do you want to be judged? In the same way you judge others, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you. Right, before you judge anyone else too harshly, before you look down on them, keep in mind that someone else might have cause to look down on you in the same way. Right, we live in a gotcha culture. Right, we're always looking to catch people, their worst moments. Right, you ever see somebody, maybe it's on the news, maybe it's a national platform, somebody, they're exposed for something that they've done, or maybe it's someone in your neighborhood, maybe it's someone within your friend group, and you see they are caught and they are tried in the court of public opinion, and they are sentenced for life. And you feel a little better about you. You watch people being cut down and you walk a little taller, feel a little superior, and see it's all fun and games until it's directed towards you. How would you like to be judged? In what way? See, if you're going to be judged in that moment, what you're wishing for are people who are going to look at your whole body of work, not just your one bad moment. You're looking for people who will be gracious to you, who will take the time to get to know you and understand you, instead of simply writing you off based on what they thought they knew. See, what Jesus isn't saying here is that we shouldn't judge other people, because there's a difference between having good judgment and being judgmental. See, Jesus is walking a very fine line here. He's saying, look, you're going to judge other people. You should have good judgment. You should evaluate. You should be discerning. This is what it is to be wise. You shouldn't walk through life indiscriminately. Oh, everybody's great. Right? That's not going to go well for you. But there's a difference between having good judgment, discerning, evaluating, having wisdom, and having an attitude of judgment, of being judgmental, of looking down on other people as though you are superior to them. So Jesus says, look, before you look down on everyone else and think you're so great, keep in mind that someone else might have reason to look down on you in the same way. And see, the attitude that you carry into the world to catch other people in the act, to judge them, if that's your attitude, understand that it will be reflected back to you. I see one of the things I've noticed in life is that often what I bring into the world is what I find. What I bring into the world gets reflected back to me. And I know this sounds kind of hokey, but if you bring positivity and joy, oftentimes it will be reflected back to you. When you smile at other people, they tend to smile back, not always. Right? You can't control everyone, right? But if you smile at other people, they tend to smile back. If you are encouraging, people tend to receive that encouragement and either give it back to you or pass it on. Right? The attitude that you carry into the world oftentimes is reflected back to you. And see, if you treat other people with grace and mercy, then that attitude, that non-judgmental, I want to evaluate, I want to discern, I want to be wise, but as I approach them that way, then oftentimes that is what you receive in return. I can't tell you how many times I've entered into difficult conversations with people who I would say could be difficult. And ahead of time, what I'm thinking about is if I want to get anywhere in this conversation for their benefit and for mine, to work through this, I have to begin with an attitude of compassion and caring and understanding, because that's how I want them to respond to me in kind. Right? So I walk in and I'm smiling, I'm exuding kindness and compassion because I deeply care about them. I want them to know that. I want them to know I care more about them and our relationship than however we work through this or don't. I want them to know that I'm more invested in their benefit than trying to label them and put them in their place. See, if someone's going to judge me, I want them to bring grace and mercy to the conversation because I know my shortcomings. I know how limited I am. I want people who judge me to look at my whole life and not just the one bad moment that I have or a few bad moments, let's be honest. Right? I want them to come and give me the benefit of the doubt and seek to understand my perspective before they simply write me off. How about you? But see, to some degree, the choice is yours because you can create that type of environment in how you live your life, in the way that you interact with other people. And if you perpetuate in your relationships the culture that we have in our world right now, which is to make knee-jerk reactions and snap judgments and write people off, sentence them to life, then don't be surprised if that's how they respond to you in kind. Or you can extend grace and you can see yourself in them, that their struggles are not that different from yours, that you are really not all that different. And what they need is to be treated better than they deserve, which is the same thing that you need. Really not all that different. This is what Jesus is saying here in verse 3. Why do you look at the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the plank in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when all the time there is a plank in your own eye? You hypocrite, first take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the speck from your brother's eye. So just to be clear, Jesus says the speck is real. He's not saying that person's not difficult. It's just in your head. He's not saying, oh, no, people are perfect, they're fine, everything's wonderful. He said, no, they have a speck. The question is, do you see what's in your eye? Why would you think you're any different? But I love the language that Jesus uses here, this imagery. I hope you can appreciate this. This, to me, is like a comedy sketch routine. I mean, you can imagine the person in the room, and they've got a little speck of something in their eye, and then you see them sort of like trying to get it out, and then into the room walks the person with the beam through their head, right? It's like this, right through here, and it's way out on either side, and they're walking around, and they're like knocking over lamps and mirrors and destroying everything, and they try to get closer to the person with the speck, and they're like hitting them in the face with that plank, right? It's a comedy sketch. I mean, that's what he's describing. He's like, man, you walk in with this plank like this, you are going to do so much damage, you're going to destroy everything. Like, it's supposed to be laughable. Jesus has a sense of humor. I hope you know that. Like this, you're not supposed to take this person seriously. This is Jesus' whole point. If you are great at finding the little faults of other people, but you're oblivious to your own, even with the best of motives, you're going to do more harm than good. you're going to create more of a mess. You're going to create more damage, right? You're like the person who goes around with a sledgehammer trying to kill the gnat and destroys their home, right? But see, we're not supposed to take this person seriously. That's Jesus' whole point. He says, don't be like this person. They got a plank. Like, you would never listen to a person like that. Like, the person that doesn't see themselves clearly is not a healthy person. The person who is so good at pointing out all of your faults, but they don't see themselves, that is an unhealthy person. Their pathology is that they see in other people what they cannot see in themselves. And you should limit that person's access to you, because otherwise their plank is going to run you through. It's going to hurt. So when you have unhealthy people who are always criticizing, always telling you everything that's wrong with you, but you realize they don't seem to see anything that's wrong with them ever, that is the sign of an unhealthy person. And you should limit their voice in your life. Because, look, ignorance and arrogance is a deadly combination. And so when you find someone who is ignorant of themselves, of who they really are, and everybody else can see it and they somehow don't, you're always going to find arrogance. Because they're not ignorant for no reason. They're ignorant because they're arrogant, because they think they've got it all figured out, because they know themselves so well, but they really know you. And so they can see everything in you that they cannot see in themselves. And so you can't have a relationship with someone like that, not a deep relationship, because it's never a two-way street. They're great at telling you everything that's wrong with you, but they never hear anything that they need to hear. And see, this is what Jesus is warning of in the very next verse, verse 6. Do not give dogs what is sacred. That sounds harsh, doesn't it? Do not throw your pearls to pigs. If you do, they may trample them under their feet and then turn and tear you to pieces. This is very harsh language, okay? Jesus does not pull punches. He is very serious about this. And what he's saying here, remember, he's not saying to turn off our brains, right? He's not saying, oh, don't evaluate, don't judge. He says, no. There are some people that you can't help. There are some people, they are like dogs and they are like pigs, right? These are not intelligent. They can be intelligent animals. I know some of you love dogs and pigs. He says, but there's something where you are wasting the pearls that you have, the knowledge that you have, the help that you want to give, your time, your energy, your resources, your compassion. Like, you can waste it on people who do not receive it. And it's like there's this quote I once heard: never try to teach a pig to sing. It will only waste your time and it will annoy the pig, right? See, when I was growing up, my mom lectured me on this so many times: to be teachable, to receive instruction. Probably because my mom is a piano teacher and I was oftentimes a very stubborn and pig-headed student. And so she would see me not listening and she'd be like, be teachable, have a teachable spirit, right? Don't be stubborn, don't be prideful, like, be teachable. And what I have come to appreciate as I've gotten older and I've worked with a lot of people in a lot of different contexts now is that to be teachable might be the most important characteristic you'll ever have in life. Because to be teachable is to have humility and courage, right? To have the humility to see that you are not all that, and the courage to accept it, and the courage to try to change. And I can tell you that in my line of work, I get a lot of people who come and they're looking for help. They want me to help them in some way. And one of the first things that I look for, in fact, the first thing I'm looking for is, are they teachable? Because if they're not teachable, then it is only going to be a waste of my time. Now, it doesn't mean that they're disposable. It doesn't mean that I write them off, but it means that I will limit my investment in them until I see that they're teachable. And this is what Jesus is saying here. He's not pulling any punches. He says there are people who will not receive what you have to share. So be wise. Have good judgment. Don't be judgmental, but have good judgment. See, this is why this is so important. Can I tell you? The degree to which you are teachable, you're willing to be coached, you're willing to listen to instruction, even when it's hard, that will determine the degree to which you're successful in life. And I don't just mean your career, I mean life, as a person, as a human being. And when you're teachable, it doesn't matter where you start, you will grow, you will learn, It can be painful, it can be hard, but you will move towards your greater potential. But if you are unteachable, this is as far as you're ever going to get. This is it. See, Jesus, he is not pulling punches. He says, when you encounter unteachable people who are too proud to learn or even admit their perfections, this is the one person that you cannot help. In fact, if you try to help them, what you'll find is that they might receive and receive and receive for a long time, but they're not actually letting it change them. And at some point, they will turn around and they will tear you to pieces. They will throw it back in your face. They will not thank you. Something I love about Jesus is that he actually speaks to us like we're adults, unlike so many of our politicians these days. Right? He speaks to us as though we should seek to understand, that we want to understand, and we're willing to wrestle with deep and difficult, challenging topics with nuance and depth. And Jesus, he doesn't just throw out a line in order to rally his base or to get his constituents all on the same side. I mean, he could do that, but one of the easiest ways to do that, can I tell you, is to just be negative. Right? All Jesus had to say was, judge those people. I bet he would have had twice as many followers. I mean, all you have to do is be negative. Negative is a powerful coalescent, right? It just rallies people. Just be negative and people just come out of the woodwork. I learned this when I lived overseas. I know this is hard to believe, but even living in as wonderful a place as Italy, I would get together with some of my expat American friends, and what I began to realize is that these were people that I really didn't have much in common with, and we probably wouldn't really have been real close if we lived in the States, but in Italy, we had something in common. Everything that drove us crazy. And we would complain. Oh man, I can't believe the metro, it's so hot and stinky and it's always slow, and the buses and and the service at this place and the bureaucracy here. And we would rally around together, and man, we became the best of friends, all complaining about everything we didn't like about this wonderful country. I mean, can you imagine complaining about Italy? That seems crazy to me now. But can I tell you, the easiest way to make friends is to complain. It's cheap, but you can do it. And this afternoon, I'm probably going to go take my kids, depending on the rain. We're going to go over to the neighborhood pool, and we're still getting to know people and building friendships. Can I tell you that if I want someone to basically write me off, what I should do is I should go and say, man, hasn't the weather been great? It's been so wonderful out here. And they'll be like, yeah, I guess. Walk away. But if I say, man, the weather's been awful. I can't even believe how hot it's been. They'll be like, I know. It's terrible. I mean, I can't even get over this, right? And then we start complaining about this and that. If you can get some people complaining, man, they will be your friends. You guys can be tight. Just complain and criticize, right? And it is effective. Just look at our political parties. It's just not healthy. It's cheap. And see, Jesus doesn't do that. He doesn't just say, well, just judge those people. He doesn't go negative, but he also, on the other side, he doesn't say, oh, but it's all fine. Everything's good, right? Just walk through life. Everything's good. You don't have to worry about it. No, he walks a very fine, but a very beautiful line. And he says, have judgment. Be discerning. Be wise. But don't be judgmental. Remember that the attitude that you carry into the world, the attitude you have towards other people, just remember that can be turned back against you. So be wise. See reality, but don't be judgmental. When you see the difficult people in the world, remember that you're not that different. Right? The people that drive you crazy, and they're obnoxious, and you don't like their ideas, you don't like their beliefs or how they vote, or you don't like how they park their car, or you don't like how they drive on the road. Like whatever that is, remember that you are not all that different. And that what they need is for someone to treat them better than they deserve. Well, one of the tragedies that I see in really the American church right now is that we have taken on the tone of our politics instead of the tone of our Savior. And believe me, listen, I see the posts, I see the comments, I hear the comments, I'm in some of those conversations, and it is disheartening. Because instead of offering hope, we're offering verdicts. And we write people off and we sentence people to a life without parole. We think we know them, we decide we are judge, jury, and executioner. And in doing so, we are not resembling the God who we claim to follow. And Jesus in John chapter 16, he says, I did not come to condemn the world, but to save the world. So how can we claim to follow him and do anything otherwise? I mean, if anyone had the right to look down on the world, to criticize the world, to say, I am vastly superior because he is, it would be Jesus. I mean, Jesus could have criticized, he could have said, man, all of you are worth nothing compared to me. He could have looked down his nose, but the only time that Jesus ever looked down on anyone, can I tell you? It's when he hung from a Roman cross. And he looked down on the people who had betrayed him, who had beaten him, who were in the process of literally killing him. And he said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. See, there is a way to restore some sanity to our world, but it will take a kind of love that seems insane to the world. The kind of love that sees the intrinsic value of every individual. The kind of love that says it doesn't matter how difficult you get, you are not disposable in the economy of God. The kind of love that sees the family resemblance, even with difficult people, because we are all made in the image of God. The kind of love that sees difficult, challenging, annoying people that sometimes we wish we just didn't have to deal with. But the kind of love that says, I'm going to treat you better than you deserve, because this is how Jesus has treated me. And maybe you're here this morning and you have never experienced that kind of love in a church. Maybe this is not the kind of love that you've experienced from other people who claim to be Christians. Listen, I get it. I've been there. I have encountered that in my own life. I'm sure I've been guilty of it as well. But I want you to know that the beauty of Jesus and the reality and the truth of his love for you is not tarnished or diminished by our failures. And I realize that we can make Jesus look very, very bad, but the reality is that Jesus' love is beyond measure. That Jesus is not judgmental. That he comes to us to seek and to save us when we were lost. And that Jesus is the one who, when we fix our eyes on him, there's this love that we have been searching for, we've been longing for. And so what I want you to know is that if you come to Easton Bible Church, right, I can't tell you that you're never going to experience judgmental people. I wish I could. I can tell you right now that we are not perfect, but my hope and my prayer is that we're in progress. And what I hope that you find here is people who, as we struggle with our own struggles, and then we begin to struggle alongside one another, is that we see ourselves in one another. And that we treat each other better than we deserve. Because it's the only response that has the power to change the human heart. The reason that Jesus gave his life is because there was no other way to save us. If he could have just beaten us into heaven, I'm sure he could have. But it was only love that could break the spell of sin and death. My prayer is that we would be a church, that we would treat other people better than they deserve, remembering that this is how we've been treated. Church, listen, there are so many things that are trying to tear us apart these days. And it's happening in churches all over our country. And in the coming weeks and months as we move towards an election, it's so sad to say that it just gets worse, right? The volume goes up, the intensity goes up. It's so easy to begin to rip and to claw at one another. And to say, how could you think that? How could you believe that? And the only way for us to survive is if we see that we're not that different. You know, I see that your struggles are mine. That I see you reflected in me, and I see myself reflected in you, that we are all made in the image of God. And that what unites us, the God who loves us, the one who is greater than all, he is greater than all that would divide us in the world. It's the only shot we have. Would you pray with me? Lord, we live in it's a tough world. And the world right now is, in our society right now, not only is it coming apart at the seams, and there's so much bitterness and anger and vitriol, it just seems to be tearing apart each other, but they are pressing on us and expect us to behave the same way. And that has become the tone of our world and our society. But Lord, what we want is to set a different tone. A tone of redemption, of compassion, of love that resonates and resounds throughout our homes and our neighborhoods and our schools and our communities, wherever we go every day. But Lord, strike that tone in each of our hearts. Or that we would hear the sweet music of you, your love, your compassion, that it would sink deep within us. I know it's funny sometimes. It seems like we talk about this a lot, but Lord, what we're waiting for is to live it, right? Lord, we don't want this just to be ideas that we read on a piece of paper, that we heard a sermon about, that we go, oh yeah, I agree with that, we acknowledge it, but Lord, we want to become a different kind of people. We want to be a people that look categorically different from the world outside, so that they would see that you are real, that they would see that you are greater than anything that they will find, that anything that they're searching for, that they would see how you have changed our lives, and that there is hope for what you can do in theirs. Lord, help us to look and sound and smell and taste and look like you this week. We pray all this in your name. Amen.